Tonight, we're diving into a world where your pinky finger could be the difference between a palace and a broom closet. Welcome to Lilliput, the land of tiny people with massive measurement problems. Imagine waking up tied to the ground by strings thinner than dental floss, surrounded by beings who look like they escaped a dollhouse. Fun fact, in this place, you're not just a visitor, you're a walking, talking ruler. And no, I don't mean the crown-wearing kind, more like the wheel use your big toe to measure everything kind. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Oh, and hit pause if you need to grab a snack first. Trust me, you'll want both hands free for this ride. Now, let me ask, where are you tuning in from tonight? Drop your city and the time in the comments. Maybe someone in Tokyo is listening at 3 a.m., while someone in NYC is procrastinating bedtime at 10 p.m. Cool, right? We're all connected by weird fictional measurement systems. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink awake, sunlight itching at your eyelids. The first thing you notice is the tugging. Little pulls on your arms, legs, even your hair. Groggily, you try to lift your hand, but it's pinned down by what feels like threads made of spider silk. Wait, no, those are ropes. Ropes so small, they're more like sewing thread to you. But to the tiny figures swarming your torso, they are industrial grade. By the king's thumbnail, it's awake. A voice squeaks from somewhere near your elbow. You tilt your head, and oh, there they are. Dozens of tiny people, each about 6 inches tall, dressed in colorful tunics that look like they are made from moth wings. They're carrying spears the size of toothpicks and ladders that could pass for embroidery hoops. But what really grabs you is the clipboard. One of them is holding, yes, a tiny clipboard, complete with a scroll of paper the size of a postage stamp. Standard procedure for foreign giants. The clipboard holder says, clearing his throat. First, measurement protocol. We need to establish your baseline dimensions for civic planning. Wait, civic planning, before you can protest. A group of them scurries up your arm, carrying what looks like a tiny tape measure made from braided grass. But no, when they hold it against your wrist, you realize it's not a tape measure. It's a strand of your own hair. They're using your hair as a ruler. First unit, the Gulliver knuckle, the clipboard holder announces, pressing the hair against your knuckle from the first joint to the tip of your finger. Perfect for measuring doorways. A standard Lilliputian home is 3 Gulliver knuckles wide. So we'll need to adjust the village perimeter now that you're here. Don't worry, we'll just trim some hedges. You blink, confused. Your knuckle is a unit of measurement, but it gets better. Another tiny figure climbs onto your shoulder, holding a tiny square of parchment and a charcoal pencil the size of a toothpick. Height, let's see from heel to crown, he mutters, pacing along your body. Each time he takes a step, he marks the parchment. Wait, is he counting your body as a series of segments. 7 feet, 6 inches in your world, he says finally. But in Lilliput, let's do the math. 1 Gulliver knuckle is 1.5 inches. So your height is exactly 60 knuckles. That's a problem. Our tallest tower is 50 knuckles. You'll have to crouch when you walk through the main square, or we could just build a new square. You can't help but smirk. In your world, people argue over metric vs. imperial. Here, they're inventing a whole new system based on your pinky. But then a tiny tailor approaches, holding a piece of cloth that looks like a napkin for your ceremonial robe. He says proudly, "We'll need your arm span from fingertip to fingertip. Don't worry. We'll add an extra knuckle for elbow room." As they measure your thumb for coin sizes, apparently, your thumbnail is the template for their gold pieces. You realize something. In Lilliput, you are the standard. Every building, every road, every piece of furniture will be scaled to your body, whether you like it or not. Need a chair, they'll carve it from a log that's exactly the length of your shin. A dinner plate, the diameter of your palm. It's flattering. In A, we're using you as a human ruler kind of way. But here's the obscure little knowledge. In the original Gulliver's Travels, Swift never mentions just how practical the Lilliputians are with their measurements. They don't just admire your size, they weaponize it. Your shoe becomes a rowboat. Your eyelashes are used as fishing hooks. And your hair, well, let's just say their weavers are very excited about the new raw material. Okay, final measurement, the clipboard holder says, climbing onto your knee, your stride length from heel to heel when you take a step, important for road construction. Now, please take a step forward. You look down at the tiny village spread out below you. The houses are like children's blocks. The roads like lines drawn with a pencil. If you take a step, you might crush half a neighborhood. Maybe I should just stand still. You suggest. Nonsense, he says. We'll just mark the safe distance from your footprints. Think of it as a human-shaped moat. Very trendy. You sigh in a world where your pinky is a foot and your stride is a mile. Survival means learning to move like a giant in a dollhouse. And hey, at least you'll never lose your measuring tape. It is technically attached to you. So as you stand there, surrounded by tiny architects and mathematicians scribbling on tiny notebooks, remember, in Lilliput, you're not just a guest. You're a living, breathing unit of measurement. And honestly, it's kind of impressive how they've turned your awkward giant body into a civic planning masterpiece. The moment they finish measuring your knuckle, the Lilliputians pivot to the next crisis. Your height. See, in their world, numbers bigger than 100 are basically sci-fi. Their largest counting tool is an abacus with beads the size of peppercorns. But your height, a whopping 60 Gulliver knuckles, as they declared earlier, that's like a human encountering a mountain that's 60 miles tall. Except here, you're the mountain, and they're drafting blueprints for a ladder to your shoulder. First, we must standardize the knuckle to Lilliputian foot ratio, says a tiny scholar with glasses made from raindrop-shaped glass. He's standing on your collarbone, waving a scroll that lists your measurements in tiny, meticulous script. Previously, our foot was based on the king's shoe, but now he gestures grandly at your leg. We have a universal standard. No more royal foot size debates. Huzzah! You suppress a laugh. In your world, metric vs. imperial caused wars. Here, they're revolutionizing their entire measurement system because a giant fell from the sky. Cute. But the real fun starts when they try to apply your height to everyday life. A team of architects gathers at your feet, arguing over how tall the new city gates should be. The old gates were 15 knuckles, says one, holding up a tiny model gate that's barely taller than your pinky. But now, if a giant needs to pass through, he glances nervously at your knees. We need at least 30 knuckles, which means rebuilding the entire north wall. Or, pipes up a younger architect, we could build 2 gates, one for giants, one for us. The giant gate can be labeled Emergency Gulliver Exit. You nod approvingly. Efficient, but then a group of accountants arrives, carrying ledgers the size of playing cards and inkwells that look like thimblefuls of ink. Their job, recalculate every civic project in Gulliver Knuckles. The palace roof, previously 40 royal feet, now 50 knuckles. The main canal, 200 knuckles long, which means they need to dig an extra 50 knuckles to match your stride length. This is chaos, mutters the head accountant, rubbing his tiny temples. Our abacuses can't handle 3-digit numbers. We'll need to invent a new symbol for 100 knuckles, maybe a little drawing of your thumb. In Jonathan Swift's original book, the Lilliputians are obsessed with precision, but Swift never detailed how they coped with the math of scaling up. Turns out, it involves a lot of tiny headaches and creative symbol making. For example, your elbow becomes their Gulliver yard, equal to 12 knuckles, because counting 12 individual knuckles was too tedious for the royal scribes. But it's not just architecture. The school children are now learning a new multiplication table. 5 knuckles make a hand, 4 hands make an arm, 10 arms make a Gulliver. A tiny teacher stands on your forearm, using your fingerprint as a blackboard to illustrate the concept. See, class, if Master Tittle here is 8 knuckles tall, how many tittles would stack up to 1 Gulliver? Answer, 7.5 tittles, which means she pauses, frowning. We need to accept that sometimes giants are fractional tittles. It's a tough concept, but necessary for trade. You feel a tiny tug on your pant leg. Well, what passes for pant leg here? They've draped a tablecloth over you as a makeshift garment. It's the royal tailor, back with a measuring tape made from your eyelash for the king's new throne, he explains. Previously, it was 20 knuckles high, but now that we know a Gulliver's knee is 30 knuckles, he gestures to your knee, which looms over the tailor like a boulder. The throne must be raised to half your knee height for symbolic parity. Translation: the king wants his throne to reach your thigh, so he can look you in the eye when he lectures you about not stepping on vegetable gardens. Fair enough. the most absurd moment comes when the royal astronomer climbs your shoulder. Carrying a tiny telescope, we must recalibrate the stars, he declares. Previously, we measured the sky in handspans, but your arm span is 60 knuckles, meaning the distance between the North Star and Orion's belt is now 1,200 knuckles, which doesn't make sense because the sky can't be bigger than you. You resist the urge to point out that, in reality, you're just a human, and the sky is, infinite. But in Lilliput, logic bends around your body. If your arm span redefines the cosmos, then so be it. By the end of the day, the village square is littered with tiny scrolls, abacuses, and exhausted scholars. The head accountant has declared a new holiday, Gulliver Conversion Day, during which all citizens must recalculate their shoe sizes, bed lengths, and bread portions in knuckles. It's a historic day, he says, yawning. Never before has a single being redefined our entire mathematical system. Usually, it takes a war or a royal foot growth spurt. You lean back carefully, trying not to jostle the tiny engineers camped out on your calves, who are debating whether your ankle bone should be the new unit for curvature. In a way, it's impressive. Their world was once defined by kings and nature, and now it's defined by you. Your body isn't just a body. It's a living, breathing equation. And hey, at least they're putting that math degree you never used to good use. Who knew your pinky would become a cornerstone of an entire civilization's measurement system? You wake up the next morning to a symphony of tiny hammers rubbing your eyes. You realize the Lilliputians have been busy. There are tiny wooden stakes planted around your feet, each topped with a flag the size of a playing card. A group of surveyors is pacing between them, using a rope tied to your big toe as a makeshift compass. Good morning, Gulliver, chirps the head surveyor, waving from the top of your sneaker, which they've repurposed as a watchtower. Today, we tackle distance. Your stride will be our new Gulliver pace, perfect for mapping the kingdom. You sit up carefully, mindful of the tiny architects camped on your thighs. Below you, the village looks like a model train set, but with actual people scurrying around your ankles like ants around a picnic basket. The problem, your pace when you're standing still. Your feet are the size of their cottages. When you walk, you're basically a human bulldozer. First, we need to establish your natural stride, says the surveyor, holding up a scroll marked Pace Calibration Protocol. Please take one step forward, slowly. Imagine you're walking on eggshells, very expensive, royal eggshells. You lift your foot, feeling like a giant in a china shop, and place it down a few feet ahead. The ground shakes slightly, and a nearby chicken coop, the size of a teacup, wobbles. Oops, but the surveyors cheer. They've marked the distance between your heels with tiny stones. 3 Gulliver paces, they declare, which translates to roughly 150 knuckles, or, in your terms, about 6 feet. Perfect, says a cartographer, kneeling to sketch your footprint in the dirt. From now on, every road in Lilliput will be measured in paces. The main highway to Blefuscu 200 paces long, which means, he gulps, we'll need to widen it. Since your foot is 10 knuckles wide, no more two-lane traffic. It's now a Gulliver-only thoroughfare. You watch as they start demolishing a row of tiny houses to make way for your lane. The homeowners are moving their furniture, tiny chairs, tables, even a miniature bookshelf, onto a cart pulled by what looks like a glorified hamster. Don't worry, the cartographer says. We'll rebuild them twice as far from the road. Safety first. But it's not just roads. The village green, which was once a cozy circle of grass, is now divided into Gulliver zones. A red flag marks the area where you're allowed to stand. No accidental trampling of the herb garden. And a blue flag signals the stride buffer zone. A stretch of dirt they've left empty in case you misstep. Think of it as a giant's version of sidewalk etiquette. Jokes a tiny traffic guard, directing a procession of ox-drawn carts. The oxen are the size of house cats around your heel. In the original book, Swift mentions that Lilliputians use Gulliver's hat as a basin, but he never delves into how they turned his movement into a science. These guys have created a whole field of Gulliver dynamics, studying how your knee bend affects wind patterns, or how your exhale creates minute breezes that mess with their sailboats. But today, it's all about pacing. A group of young apprentices approaches, carrying a ladder made from your eyelashes. Apparently, they're stronger than they look. Their task: measure the height of your knee when you take a step to determine how tall bridge arches need to be. If your knee clears 40 knuckles at mid-stride, explains their teacher, we can build low bridges for us and tall ones for you. No more ducking. You try to walk again, this time focusing on lifting your feet as high as possible. It feels like you're marching in slow motion, knees hiking up to your chest like a cartoon character. The Lilliputians applaud. Your giant gait has just become the new standard for bridge engineering. But then disaster strikes. You misjudge the distance to a tiny orchard, and your pinky toe grazes a row of apple trees, each no taller than your ankle. The trees snap like toothpicks, and the Lilliputians gasp in unison. It's okay, you say quickly, kneeling to inspect the damage. I can help replant them. No need, says a farmer, wiping his brow. We'll just redesign the orchard around your footprints. Think of it as a Gulliver-shaped grove, very avant-garde. He pulls out a tiny notebook and starts sketching a spiral pattern that weaves between your toes. Actually, this could be better. Your shadow will protect the saplings from the midday sun, nature's air conditioner. By evening, the village has a new layout. Roads radiating from your usual standing spot, like spokes on a wheel. Houses clustered in Gulliver-safe zones, and a giant, to them, sign that reads pace carefully. Lilliputians at work. You're even given a tiny map, etched onto a piece of your own fingernail, showing the kingdom's boundaries in paces. As you settle down for the night, a tiny astronomer climbs onto your shoulder to adjust their star charts again. We've decided the moon is 10,000 paces away, he says, squinting through his telescope, which makes sense, since it's about as high as your head when you stand on tiptoe. You don't have the heart to tell him. The moon is actually 238,000 miles away. In Lilliput, reality bends to your stride. Your steps aren't just movement. They are a blueprint for an entire world. And honestly, it's kind of nice to be a living GPS, even if it means you'll never be able to take a midnight snack run without risking a village. The smell of tiny bread wafts up your nose the next morning, followed by the faint clatter of dishes the size of thimbles. You open your eyes to find a procession of cooks marching up your torso, each carrying a tray balanced on their heads. Though tray is generous, it's more like a saucer from a doll's tea set. Breakfast protocol, declares the head cook, a stout Lilliputian with a flour-stained apron tied around his waist. First, we must calculate your caloric needs based on, well, you. He pulls out a tiny scale made from a seashell and a strand of your hair. Apparently, they've repurposed your measurements again. A standard Lilliputian consumes 100 crumbs a day, he says, squinting at the scale. You, however, are, let's see, 1,000 times our size. No, wait, your weight in knuckles cubed. This is why we need a royal mathematician. Right, in Lilliput, math isn't just numbers. It's a contact sport. They gather a council of scholars, including the astronomer from last night, who still smells like stardust, to debate your caloric intake. Volume vs. mass, argues one, waving a scroll marked Gulliver's gut geometry. His stomach is a cylinder. Radius equals half his waist circumference. Height equals nonsense, interrupts another, holding up a tiny model of your torso. It's a rectangular prism. We must base portions on surface area, not volume. Have you seen how much he sweats? He needs extra hydration. You suppress a laugh as they measure your waist with a string made from your eyebrow hair. Ouch. But worth it for science. The final verdict. Your daily ration should be 1 Gulliver unit, defined as the amount of food that fits in your cupped hand, which to them is a mountain. To you, it's a snack. Here's your breakfast, sir, says a nervous kitchen helper, placing a Gulliver unit on your palm. It consists of 12 tiny loaves, each the size of a thumb, a jug of milk that could fill a shot glass, and a single strawberry that looks like it came from a fairy's garden. You stare at it. In your world, that's one bite. Here, it's a royal feast. Is something wrong? Asks the head cook, wringing his tiny hands. We used your pinky to measure the bread. Each loaf is exactly 3 knuckles long. That's 3 times a normal citizen's portion. You decide not to mention that you could swallow their entire bakery in one gulp. Instead, you nibble the strawberry carefully, trying not to let the juice drip on their tiny robes. The Lilliputians watch, fascinated, as your teeth close around the fruit. Fascinating, says the royal dietitian, scribbling in a notebook. Jaw mechanics. 50 knuckles of bite force will need to reinforce the bread ovens. Your chewing creates shockwaves. In Swift's original tale, Gulliver mentions the Lilliputians bring him 1,000 cows and 10,000 sheep for food. But he never details how they calculated that. Turns out, it involves a lot of panicked debates and time tiny abacuses, smoking from overuse. Today, they're testing a new system. Your weight, measured by how many Lilliputians it takes to lift you, spoiler. All of them, divided by the average carrot yield. Science by lunchtime. The problem becomes obvious. Your Gulliver unit isn't enough. Your stomach rumbles like a distant thunderstorm, and the Lilliputians mistake it for an earthquake. Emergency food protocol, shouts the king, who's been watching from his tiny throne, now elevated to your knee height. For dining equality, bring the reserve grain. The giant is starving. Cue a parade of oxen, the size of gerbils, pulling carts loaded with what looks like birdseed. The head cook explains. Each grain is a Gulliver seed. One seed equals 1 Lilliputian calorie. So, to reach your required 2,000 calories, he pauses, counting on his fingers. You need 2,000 seeds, which fits in a thimble. You stare at the thimble of seeds in your hand. In your world, that's a garnish. Here, it's a mathematical miracle. Maybe we should switch to your measurement system, suggests the royal mathematician, sweating. How many human bowls do you need? We can repurpose your shoe as a soup bowl. Now, that's a good idea. They clean your sneaker. No easy feat. They use your eyelashes as scrub brushes and fill it with a stew made from tiny vegetables and a single, very brave chicken. The soup is delicious, but the experience is surreal. Sipping broth from your own shoe while tiny chefs take notes on your mouth-to-shoe ratio. Tomorrow, we'll experiment with portion control, says the dietitian, eyeing your empty shoe bowl. Perhaps a Gulliver bucket as the standard unit. Your hat could work. We just need to waterproof it with beeswax. You nod, already imagining the Lilliputians using your baseball cap as a grain silo. The truth is, their measurement system is a Rube Goldberg machine of tiny logic. Everything must relate to you, even if it means turning your accessories into cutlery. But hey, at least they're trying. And honestly, a shoe bowl of stew is more memorable than any restaurant meal you've had. As the sun sets, the kitchen staff debts whether you burp. But let's keep it PG countries as a weather event. It does tiny umbrellas are now mandatory near your mouth. You lean back, still slightly hungry, but rough, entertaining. In Lilliput, even eating is a science project. And you're the lab rat with giant moles. The morning after your shoe bowl stew adventure, you're greeted by a tiny engineer clinging to your eyelid, wielding a magnifying glass the size of a postage stamp. Time to solve the temporal paradox, he declares, his voice muffled by your eyelash brushing his face. Our sunglasses are too slow. Our sundial's too tiny. We need a giant-scale timekeeper. Right, in Lilliput, time is a tricky thing. Their old system used beats of the royal heart. But your heart thumps like a drum solo compared to their delicate tick-tocks. Now they're leaning in close, literally, to your eyeball to invent a new unit. The Gulliver blink. First, we measure your natural blink rate, says the engineer, attaching a tiny device to your eyelid that looks like a spider made of thread and toothpicks. One blink equals the time it takes your eyelid to descend and rise. Perfect for short intervals. A Lilliputian meal, 15 blinks. A royal audience, 50 blinks. But for hours, he gestures to the sky. We need something bigger. Your heartbeat, perhaps. One heart thump equals 10 blinks. You try to sit still as a team of chronographers counts your blinks, scribbling on scrolls balanced on your cheekbone. Average blink rate, 15 per minute, declares the head chronographer, wiping sweat from his brow, which means a Gulliver hour is 900 blinks. But wait, when you're tired, you blink slower. Do we factor in tired blinks? This could collapse the economy. In Gulliver's travels, Swift never touches on timekeeping. But let's be real. If your body is their ruler, your biology becomes their clock. They've already started using your breathing as a metronome for marching bands. Inhale for 3 blinks. Exhale for 5. Perfect for parade sync. And your heartbeat as a bedtime lullaby. Thump thump, little one. 20 thumps till dawn. But the blink becomes their holy grail. They build a giant, to them, clock tower in the town square. Its face decorated with a painted version of your eye, blinking on the hour. Each blink hour is marked by a tiny trumpet blast, and citizens set their schedules around your eyelid movements. Don't be late for the Blink 10 market, warns a vendor, arranging his wares, each the size of a fingernail clipping, on a tray made from your thumbnail. The problem, you can't help blinking when something tickles your eye, like when a tiny bird lands on your nose, or a Lilliputian scholar decides to use your eyebrow as a ladder. Emergency time recalibration, shouts the chronographers, scrambling to adjust the town clock after you sneeze and blink 3 times in a row. That was a triple blink. We must add 3 blinks to the national timeline. Even your sleep cycle throws them off. When you nap, your blink rate drops, and they have to invent sleep blinks, which are slower and worth half a regular blink. This is why we need a royal sleep schedule, says the king, frowning at a chart of your naps. If you sleep for 500 sleep blinks, that's 250 wake blinks lost. Productivity plummets. You try to explain circadian rhythms, but they're too busy attaching tiny alarms to your eyelashes. Gentle buzzers made from mosquito wings that vibrate to remind you to blink on schedule. For consistency, the engineer says proudly, now you're not just a timekeeper, you're a reliable timekeeper. By midday, the entire village runs on Gulliver time. School children recite blink rhymes. 5 blinks to wash your hands, 10 blinks to eat your bread. Farmers plant crops based on your heartbeat intervals. So, when the thump hits 30, harvest at thump 60. And the Royal Orchestra plays symphonies timed to your breathing. It's equal parts absurd and impressive. They've turned your body into a living, breathing metronome. But the best part, when you need a break, you just stop blinking for a few seconds. The world around you freezes as Lilliputians wait, mid-conversation, for your eyelid to move. Ah, the giant pause, mutters a philosopher, taking notes. A new dimension of time, neither blink nor wake, but a moment of divine stillness. You laugh, which jostles the tiny alarm on your eyelid. Oops, the chronographers sigh and start recalibrating again. But you can't help feeling a little proud. In a world where time time is measured by your blinks. You're not just part of the day. You are the day. And hey, at least you'll never be late for dinner again. As long as you remember to blink on cue, you wake up with a tiny comb tangled in your hair. A sure sign the Lilliputians have been at work again. But this time, it's not for measurement, it's for currency. Good morning, Gulliver, chirps a royal mint worker, dangling from a strand of your hair like it's a silk rope. Today, we formalize the Gulliver hair as our standard unit of value. 1 hair equals the weight of 3 of your eyebrow hairs. Don't worry, we plucked them while you slept. Consent is for giants who don't need an economy. Wait, what? You reach up to find a small bald patch above your ear. Ouch, turns out in Lilliput, money isn't minted from gold or silver. It's woven from your hair. Each strand is weighed, measured, and stamped with a tiny crown. Using a stamp made from your fingernail clipping to become legal tender. Previously, we used seashells, explains the mint master, holding up a tiny scale where your eyebrow hair balances against 3 Lilliputian pebbles. But seashells are unreliable. Tides change. Seagulls steal them. Your hair, though, infinite resource. Well, almost. Please try not to rub your head too much. Each hair lost is a potential recession. You watch as a group of citizens gathers below, holding baskets of your fallen hairs like they are precious gems. A farmer trades 2 hairs for a sack of grain the size of a thimble, while a tailor demands 5 hairs for a shirt made from your beard clippings. Yes, they've started weaving your facial hair into fabric, Gulliver tweed. They're calling it. In Swift's book, Gulliver gives the Lilliputians gold from his pocket, but they are more fascinated by his clothes and body than precious metals. Now we're filling in the blanks. Turns out they're pragmatists. Your hair is abundant, durable, and directly tied to your presence. Read. If you leave, the economy collapses, so they are incentivized to keep you happy. The problem, you shed like a golden retriever in spring every time you scratch your head. A snowstorm of hairs rains down, sending merchants into a frenzy. Inflation, inflation, shouts a tiny banker, chasing a stray hair down the street. Too many hairs in circulation. Each hair is now worth 2 pebbles instead of 3. We need a hairback program. The king intervenes, establishing a royal hair reserve. A team of barbers, armed with scissors made from your fingernails, carefully trims your hair in controlled amounts, ensuring a steady supply without triggering deflation. Think of it as a haircut for economic stability, says the royal economist. Adjusting his tiny glasses, will store excess hairs in a vault made from your shoelace, impenetrable, yet flexible. You visit the mint, where tiny artisans are melting down your hair. Yes, melting, apparently. They've discovered your hair can be shaped into tiny ingots to create coins. Each coin is a disc of woven hair, embossed with your profile, from the neck up, since your torso is too big for the stamp. Legal tender, the mint master says proudly, backed by the full faith and giant of Gulliver. But the funniest moment comes when a pickpocket is caught trying to snip a lock of your hair Mid-stride, "You thief," shouts the guard, holding up the stolen hair like a trophy. That's 5 hairs worth of potential growth. You've destabilized the wool market. The culprit is sentenced to weave blankets from your leg hair. A harsh punishment, since leg hair is coarser and less valuable. Gulliver burlap, they call it. By evening, the village has a new ritual. Before bed, every citizen counts their hairs by the light of your campfire, which is just a pile of twigs. But to them, it's a bonfire. Children sing lullabies about hairs in the bank, safe and sound, while merchants dream of trading up to Gulliver beard coins, the rarest, since beard hair is thicker and thus more valuable per strand. You run a hand through your hair, feeling the tiny bald patches where the mint workers plucked strands. It's odd being a walking ATM, but there's a strange logic to it. In Lilliput, value isn't abstract, it's tangible, physical, tied to your very body. Lose a hair, lose a piece of their economy. Keep it, and you're literally worth your weight in, well, hair. And hey, at least you'll never forget your wallet again. Your currency is literally attached to you. Though maybe start using a hair tie for the economy's sake. You step out of your makeshift shelter, a tent made from your bed sheet, stitched together with your eyelashes, and nearly bash your forehead on a brand new archway. "Oops, sorry about that," calls a tiny architect, dangling from a rope tied to your eyebrow. "We forgot to account for your uprightness." Welcome to Lilliputian architecture, a world where doorways are measured to the millimeter. Your millimeter. The archway in question is a masterpiece of tiny stonework, its keystone carved to resemble your kneecap for symbolic strength. But it's only 30 knuckles tall. Translation: you have to hunch like a guilty giant every time you enter a building. Standard doorway height used to be 15 knuckles, explains the architect, adjusting his tiny hard hat made from a walnut shell. But after your incident with the bakery awning, he gestures to the slightly dented roof of a nearby shop. We've revised the code to Gulliver shoulder height plus 5 knuckles for giant dignity. You rub your neck, already sore from crouching inside the nearest house, which looks like a dollhouse that swallowed a Lego set. The ceiling is a mere 40 knuckles high, perfect for Lilliputians. But for you, it's like standing in a crawl space. The homeowner, a cheerful weaver, offers you a seat. A chair carved from a log that's exactly the length of your shin. It's sturdy, but sitting down means your knees reach the ceiling. "Don't worry," she says, handing you a teacup the size of a thimble. "We're building you a giant wing with 60 knuckle ceilings. It'll have its own door, no more crouching." In the original book, Gulliver sleeps in a bed made from 600 Lilliputian beds stitched together. But Swift never describes the day-to-day architecture. Turns out, every nail, every beam, every roof tile is scaled to you. Your fingernail clippings are used as roof shingles. Gulliver slate, fire assistant, and surprisingly elegant. Your leg hair as insulation keeps the drafts out and reminds us of your comforting presence. And your footprints as blueprints for foundation stones. A construction crew across the square is building a new town hall. Its cornerstone marked with a carving of your pinky, the unit of measurement, not the finger itself, though they did consider using the actual finger as a pillar. With 20 Gulliver wrists, shouts the foreman, measuring the foundation with a rope made from your beard hair, height 50 knuckles, so the giant can see over the roof when he waves to visiting dignitaries. You test the new giant door, which is basically a gap in the wall framed by 2 of your ribs, donated reluctantly after a heated debate about structural integrity. It's 40 knuckles wide, enough for you to squeeze through sideways, but not without scraping your elbow on the Gulliver-themed carvings, tiny depictions of your adventures, like the time you sneezed and blew away a windmill. The royal palace gets a makeover too. The king's throne room now has a Gulliver alcove where you can stand upright, your head brushing a ceiling painted with constellations based on your freckles. No more neck cramps for our giant guest, declares the king, sitting on his newly elevated throne, now level with your hip, for eye contact equality. But the most absurd innovation is the Gulliver staircase, a set of steps that alternate between tiny treads for Lilliputians and giant platforms for you. Climbing it feels like playing a real-life game of Twister. 1 foot on a step, the size of a postage stamp. The other on a slab of stone that could be a picnic table, perfect for interspecies harmony, says the engineer, proudly showing off the spiral design that wraps around your ankle like a vine. By sunset, the village skyline is a patchwork of normal houses and Gulliver-compatible structures, the latter marked by oversized doorways and roof lines that slope away from your probable standing spots. Kids play a game where they try to guess which part of your body inspired a building. That tower's as tall as his pinky. That bridge is as wide as his thumb. You lean against a wall made from your own toenail clippings. Don't ask how they collected those. And watch the sunset paint your shadow across the village. In Lilliput, architecture isn't just about bricks and mortar. It's about building a world where a giant can belong, 1 knuckle at a time. Sure, you'll never stand up straight in a bakery again, and your shoes will forever be mistaken for garages. But there's a charm to it. Every doorframe is a reminder that you're not just a visitor. You're a living, breathing building code. And honestly, the kneecap keystone, surprisingly stylish. The first time you step into a Lilliputian field, you feel like a dinosaur in a rose garden. The soil is soft underfoot, dotted with rows of crops that look like green eyelashes sprouting from the earth. A tiny farmer, perched on a ladder propped against your calf, waves urgently. Watch the wheat. Each stalk is 2 knuckles tall. Your heel is a tsunami of dirt. Right, in Lilliput, agriculture isn't just about seeds and sunlight. It's about footprint geometry. The moment you arrived, they measured the area of your soul, 15 knuckles long, 8 knuckles wide, and declared it the standard Gulliver plot. Every farm is now a grid of these plots, outlined with tiny stones that look like breadcrumbs to you. Step outside the lines, and you're a walking crop destroyer. See this field, says the farmer, gesturing to a patch of land divided into squares, no bigger than your palm. Each plot grows exactly 100 Gulliver carrots, named after you, of course. They're the size of your pinky nail. So a full harvest feeds a family for a week. But if you step here, he points to the edge of a plot, you'll smother 50 carrots. Tragedy. You nod, trying to focus on placing your feet like a ballerina in boots. It's ridiculous. You're a grown human, tiptoeing through a garden that smells like a teaspoon of soil. But the Lilliputians take it seriously. They've even invented a footprint forecast system, using your last 3 steps to predict where you'll walk next. Farmer Grumble lost 3 plots yesterday because you shifted your weight while scratching your nose, says the farmer, shaking his head. We've started planting sacrificial crops around your usual standing spots, just in case. In Swift's book, Gulliver mentions eating 1,000 sheep in a meal, but he never describes how the Lilliputians grew the food. Turns out, it's a delicate dance of giant-scale precision. They measure rainfall in Gulliver drips. 1 drip equals the size of your tear, and sunlight in Gulliver shadows. How many plots your shadow covers at noon. Your very presence alters their ecosystem. Your breath creates wind tunnels that help pollinate flowers. But your body heat can wilt lettuce if you stand too close. The royal agronomist, a tiny woman with soil under her nails and a notebook tied to your shoelace, has a breakthrough. Your footprints make excellent irrigation channels, she declares, showing you a network of tiny trenches dug along the edges of your soles. When it rains, water pools in the indentations and trickles to the roots. We're calling it Gulliver guttering, nature's own sprinkler system. You watch as they redirect a tiny stream into your latest footprint, turning it into a mini pond for watercress. Genius, if slightly weird. But then comes the cornfield, rows of plants that reach your ankle, each cob the size of a thumbtack. A group of children is playing giant dodge, weaving between your feet to collect fallen kernels. Don't step on the tassels, they shout, giggling as your shadow swallows them whole. The biggest challenge, crop rotation. Your footprints compact the soil, so they've developed a system. Plant carrots in a plot for 3 seasons, then let your foot fertilize it by standing there for a day. Translation: you get to rest. They get nutrient-rich dirt from your shoe treads. It's symbiosis, says the agronomist, hugging a tiny sack of soil that's been Gulliver enriched. But not all experiments succeed. The first time you sneezed over a pumpkin patch, the blast of air uprooted half the plants. Now they build tiny windbreaks from your hair clippings, arranging them in patterns that mimic your lung shape for aerodynamic efficiency. Your sneeze is a force of nature, the agronomist admits, but we're learning to harness it. Next year, we'll use your exhale to power windmills, and by evening, you're exhausted from concentrating on every step. The farmers, though, are thrilled. They've mapped your gate into a safe walking path that loops around the village, avoiding all plots except the sacrificial ones. As you sit down, your shadow stretches over a field of barley that's just started to bloom. They're tiny heads bowing in the breeze you created by shifting your weight. In Lilliput, agriculture isn't just about growing food. It's about growing with you. Every root, every shoot, every harvest is a testament to their ability to turn your giant flaws into tiny triumphs. Sure, you'll never walk through a field without feeling like a disaster waiting to happen. But hey, at least you're a disaster with a purpose. And who knows, maybe someday they'll invent a way to turn your clumsy steps into a new type of fertilizer. For now, though, just focus on the tiny farmer waving from your shoelace, offering you a Gulliver carrot, the sweetest, tiniest vegetable you'll ever almost crush. You wake up to find your arm swarmed by tiny tailors, each balancing on a different joint, like they're playing a human version of Twister. Clothing protocol, declares the head tailor, a man with a tape measure made from your leg hair looped around his neck, and a thimble on his nose as a magnifying glass. We can't have you wandering around in a tablecloth forever. Dignity, Gulliver, dignity. Right, your current outfit is a bedsheet tied with shoelaces, which the Lilliputians consider scandalously casual. Now, they're determined to dress you in something fit for a giant, something that combines their precision measurements with what they think is high fashion. Spoiler, it involves a lot of tiny buttons and fabric patterns that look like they were designed by a toddler with a crayon. First, the Gulliver arm, says the tailor, stretching your arm out straight and measuring from shoulder to fingertip. 30 knuckles long, perfect for defining sleeve length. But wait, he squints at your elbow when you bend it. The arm becomes 32 knuckles. Do we design for resting or reaching? This is a philosophical question. You suppress a laugh as they debate whether your sleeves should be dynamic, allowing elbow movement, or stately, stiff. For royal audiences, eventually they compromise. 2 sets of sleeves, one for eating, short, to avoid dipping into soup bowls, one for waving, flowing, to create a majestic breeze effect when you move. The fabric is a marvel, a blend of your shed hair for strength and silk from Lilliputian moths for softness. Dyed a color they call Gulliver blue, a shade that matches your iris, as observed by a tiny artist who spent 3 hours staring into your eye. Fashion should reflect the wearer, the tailor says solemnly, patting a bolt of fabric that's roughly the size of a handkerchief to you, but a banquet table to them. Cutting the cloth is a production. They use scissors made from your fingernail clippings, sharpened on your molar. Don't ask. And pins crafted from your eyelashes. Every seam is measured twice. Once in knuckles for precision, once in Gulliver thumbs for intuitive fit. A thumb's width at the hip allows for sitting, explains the tailor, demonstrating by placing his entire hand, the size of your pinky nail, on your hip. The real fun starts with the fitting. The first shirt they present is a masterpiece of tiny stitching, with a collar shaped like your collarbone for anatomical harmony, and cuffs decorated with tiny embroidery of your footprints. But when you put it on, the sleeves hang past your knees. They forgot to account for your wrist focusing only on the upper arm. "Ah, a minor miscalculation," says the tailor. Adjusting his thimble glasses will add a Gulliver cuff, a decorative flap that covers the excess fabric. Very avant-garde. Next, the trousers, measured from your waist, using a belt made from your shoelace to your ankle. They are supposed to be snug, but breathable. Instead, they're baggy enough to fit a small village. The legs ending in frills they call Gulliver ruffles. To hide the fact that they ran out of fabric, functionality meets flair, the tailor chirps, ignoring the fact that you're tripping over your own pant legs. In Gulliver's Travels, Swift mentions that Gulliver's clothes are made from the nation's entire cloth production. But he doesn't detail the design process. Turns out, Lilliputian tailors are obsessed with giant ergonomics, debating whether pockets should be placed at your knee, accessible to them, or your hip, accessible to you, and whether buttons should be the size of your thumbnail, functional, or your earlobe, ornamental. Spoiler, they chose earlobe-sized buttons. Good luck doing them up. The final ensemble is a cape made from your old t-shirt, dyed with berry juice, and emblazoned with a giant, to them, portrait of your face. For state occasions, the tailor declares, ignoring the fact that the cape fits like a dish towel on a scarecrow, you pose for the village painter, who captures you in full regalia, standing next to a tiny fountain shaped like your pinky. The caption, "Gulliver the Magnificent, wearer of fabric." By evening, the village children are imitating your Gulliver cuffs and ruffles with their own clothes, miniature capes made from napkins, cuffs pinned to mimic your oversized sleeves. The tailor, now a local hero, starts a new line, Gulliver Chic, where giant mistakes become tiny trends. You look at yourself in a puddle, the closest thing to a mirror, noting the mismatched sleeves and lopsided collar. It's a mess, but it's your mess. In Lilliput, fashion isn't about fit, it's about faith. Faith that, with enough tiny stitches and overly complicated measurements, even a giant can look dashing. Your mid-shoe on a Gulliver carrot, the size of a jelly bean, but surprisingly crunchy. When a tiny carpenter tugs at your pant leg, well, the strip of fabric they've tied around your calf as a makeshift trouser, emergency tool, recalibration, he shouts, waving a tiny saw that's barely longer than your pinky. The new bridge beam is 2 knuckles too thick. Our saws can't cut it. Ah, right, in Lilliput, tools aren't just tools. They're biometric masterpieces. Every hammer, wrench, and chisel is sized to your fingers. Because why use a standard unit when they have a walking, talking giant to model after? The problem, their Gulliver tool, is a thimble-sized hammer to you, but to them, it's a sledgehammer. First, the Gulliver grip, explained the head craftsman. A woman with a tool belt made from your shoelace and a level crafted from your eyelash. We base all handles on the circumference of your pinky, 3 knuckles around. Perfect for human hands, or giant hands, we thought. Turns out, your pinky is the size of our forearms. Oops. You watch as she presents a new hammer. A handle carved from a twig, your pinky thickness, of course, with a head made from your fingernail clipping, sharpened to a point, because why not? And to you, it's a toothpick with a button on the end. To her, it's the future of construction. Try it, she urges, pointing to a plank of wood the size of a tongue depressor. You grip the hammer, feeling like a giant holding a cocktail umbrella, and swing, the nail inserted by a team of tiny assistants, bends sideways, and the plank splinters. Ah, says the craftsman, scribbling in her notebook, we forgot to account for impact force. Your swing generates 100 times our gravitational pull. We'll need a Gulliver shock absorber ACA, a pillow made from your beard hair. In Swift's book, Gulliver uses his eyelashes as fishing hooks, but he never describes the Lilliputians reverse engineering his body into a toolbox. Now your fingernails are chisels, your teeth are nutcrackers. They've tested this, much to your alarm. And your hair is rope. Need to lift a boulder. They tie a dozen strands around it and ask you to please just nudge it. Now the Royal Blacksmith Shop is a marvel of tiny innovation. They've built an anvil from your kneecap bone, donated after a lengthy debate about sacrificial body parts, and a forge fueled by the lint from your pocket. Apparently, it burns hot enough for their tiny purposes. Every nail they make is exactly the length of your thumbnail. Gulliver nails. Perfect for attaching shingles, your fingernail clippings, of course, to roofs. But the most absurd tool is the Gulliver screwdriver. A blade made from your toenail, ground to a point, with a handle carved from your earlobe. They insisted on anatomical accuracy for giant screws, the blacksmith explains, holding up a screw that's smaller than a grain of rice. You nod, pretending to understand, as he demonstrates how it fits perfectly into a hole drilled by their Gulliver drill. A twig spun by 6 Lilliputians on a treadmill. You get your chance to help when a cartwheel breaks. The wheel is the size of a coaster, the axle a toothpick. The craftsman hands you a wrench that's basically a loop of your hair, shaped to fit the axle nut, the size of a poppy seed. Just twist, she says, smiling. You try, but your fingers are too clumsy. You end up bending the axle instead. It's okay, she says, patting your thumb. We'll invent a Gulliver wrench with a bigger loop, maybe 2 hairs instead of 1. And by evening, the village has a new tool, the Gulliver palm press, a flat stone your palm-sized. To them, used to flatten dough and dreams. You press it into the ground, and tiny bakers rush to shape bread around the edges. Efficiency, declares the head baker, ignoring the fact that you could flatten their entire bakery with a sneeze. In Lilliput, tools aren't just tools. They are a love letter to your giantness. Every chisel, every hammer, every tiny saw is a reminder that even the clumsiest giant can be a toolbox, as long as someone's there to craft a thimble-sized wrench for his pinky. You wake up with a scratchy throat, which in Lilliput translates to a full-blown medical emergency. Within minutes, a team of tiny doctors descends on your pillow, carrying stethoscopes made from your hair and clipboards the size of playing cards. Vital signs, shouts the head physician, pressing a tiny ear trumpet, your eyelash curled into a spiral. to your neck. Heart rate, 70 thumps per blink, normal for a giant. Temperature, let's see. Place the thermometer under your tongue. The thermometer they present is a sliver of metal, your fingernail clipping, polished, attached to a thread, your leg hair. You stick it under your tongue, trying not to laugh as the doctors squint at the tiny mercury column. A single bead of quicksilver, smaller than a freckle, 100.2 degrees Gulliver, declares the physician, wiping his brow. A fever. We must administer the Gulliver elixir. Dosage based on your body mass. Ah, right. In Lilliput, medicine isn't just science. It's a geometry problem. They measure dosages in Gulliver units, which translates to take your weight, calculated by how many Lilliputians it takes to lift you. 600. Give or take. Divide by the average raindrop size your tear, and multiply by the number of freckles on your nose. 17. They've counted. The result, a potion that looks like it could fit in a thimble. First, the base ingredient. 1 Gulliver teardrop, says the apothecary, catching a tear with a tiny vial, your thumbtack. Your tears have natural healing properties. We tested it on a broken pinky toe. She adds a pinch of powder, ground from your toenail clippings. Don't ask. And a drop of green liquid extract of Lilliputian daisy, mixed with your sweat. Now the tricky part, balancing the dose. Too much, and you might grow a second head. Too little, and your throat stays scratchy. In Gulliver's Travels, Swift mentions the Lilliputians give Gulliver a sedative, but he never details their medical measurements. Turns out, they've invented a whole field called Gulliver pharmacology, which involves measuring your saliva pH with litmus paper made from your eyebrow hair, and using your fingerprint as a mortar to grind herbs. The elixir is ready. A shimmering drop in a vial the size of a pea. Drink up, says the physician, climbing a ladder to reach your mouth. You tip your head back and let the drop fall on your tongue. It tastes like lemon candy mixed with dirt, probably the toenail powder. Within minutes, your throat feels better, but something strange happens. Every time you yawn, tiny flowers fall from your mouth. Die, says the physician, consulting his notes. Side effect of using toenail as an emulsifier. Causes oral botany. Nothing to worry about. Just don't yawn near the bakery. And the next day, you develop a headache. So they try a new approach. Gulliver bloodletting, which involves pricking your finger with a needle your eyelash and collecting 3 drops of blood. Your blood is 1,000 times thicker than ours, explains the surgeon. So 3 drops equal a full transfusion for us. We'll mix it with willow bark extract and apply it to your temple. You feel a tiny poultice made from your blood and crushed leaves being pressed to your forehead. It works, your headache fades. But now your skin has a faint pink tint. Fashionable, declares a passing villager, who's already started copying the look with beetroot juice. By week's end, the medical team has invented a whole range of Gulliver remedies. You watch as they measure out a dose of cough syrup using a spoon carved from your fingernail. It's absurd, but there's a logic to it. Every part of you, from tears to toenails, is a potential cure. In Lilliput, medicine isn't just about healing. It's about harnessing the giant in their midstand hay. At least you'll never need to remember your dosage. They've engraved it on a plaque made from your fingernail. 1 Gulliver unit equals 1 drop of everything, plus a pinch of hope. You're minding your own business, trying not to step on a parade of ants, which, in Lilliput, are the size of your pinky nail and considered sacred. When a tiny judge marches up your calf, banging a gavel made from your toenail, hear ye, hear ye, the court of Gulliver's body parts is now in session. Bring forth the accused. Right, in Lilliput, justice isn't just blind, it's measurable. Every crime and punishment is tied to a part of your body. Because why use abstract concepts like years in prison when you have a talking ruler to model after? The accused, a sheepish Lilliputian with a stolen loaf of bread, the size of your thumbnail in his pocket, stands before the judge's bench, your shoelace, folded into a chair, charged with theft of 3 knuckles of bread, declares the judge, holding up a tiny tape measure, your hair, of course, punishment to be determined by Gulliver finger length. The defendant's hand is 4 knuckles long. He must repay 4 knuckles of bread, plus 1 knuckle for moral restitution. You watch as the thief is led away to a bakery, where he'll need dough for 5 knuckles worth of time. Translated, 5 of your finger lengths, which is about 7.5 minutes in your world. It's absurd, but efficient. Every punishment is a tangible, measurable thing, tied to your body like a bizarre form of justice. In Gulliver's Travels, Swift mentions that Lilliputians have strict laws, but he never details how they scale punishment for giants or dwarves. Now we know. They invented Gulliver jurisprudence, where every penalty is a ratio of your body parts. Murder, 100 knuckles of community service. Translated, cleaning your toenails, which is a Herculean task. Jaywalking, 5 knuckles of fines. Paid in your hair, of course. The real fun starts with body part infringements. A villager who accidentally steps on your shadow is charged with shadow trespass, punishable by painting your portrait on their house. Using paint made from your crushed up freckles. Don't ask. A child who pulls your hair gets hair theft. Sentenced to braiding 100 strands into rope for the town's emergency supplies. You become the living, breathing gavel. When 2 farmers argue over a plot of land, the judge measures the disputed area with a string cut to the length of your pinky. 3 knuckles wide belongs to Farmer McGee. The rest is 2 knuckles. Farmer Brown can keep it. When a couple divorces, they split their belongings 50-50 by Gulliver palm. Each gets half the items that fit in your cupped hand, but the strangest punishment is Gulliver posture penance. A noble who insulted the king must stand with his arms outstretched for 1 Gulliver arm length, 30 knuckles, or about 45 minutes, while citizens throw tiny pieces of bread at him, the size of your toenail clippings. For accuracy, it's about humility, explains the judge, adjusting his tiny wig made from your eyebrow hair. He must learn to stand as tall as a giant, but with the patience of a Lilliputian. You witness a thief being sentenced to Gulliver nail growth time. He has to wait until his thumbnail grows 1 knuckle, which is about a month. During that time, he must wear a sign that says, "I stole a thumb's worth." The logic, your nails grow slowly, so it's a lengthy sentence in their terms. By evening, the village square is dotted with tiny criminals performing their punishments. A pickpocket polishing your shoe with a cloth made from his own shirt. A vandal repainting a wall with a brush with bristles of your hair. A noisy neighbor forced to listen to your heartbeat through an ear trumpet for 100 thumps of silence. It's a justice system unlike any you've seen, equal parts precise and absurd, all tied to the size of your pinky. And while you're not sure if it's fair, you have to admit there's something refreshing about a punishment you can measure with your own body. Just don't forget, in Lilliput, every finger, every toe, every hair is a potential law. So maybe keep your hands to yourself, unless you want to be charged with excessive finger waving, punishable by, well, they're still measuring that one. You wake up to the sound of tiny trumpets made from your eyelashes, curled into horns, and the smell of sugar frosting. Lilliput is throwing a celebration, and you're the guest of honor, but not just any guest. You're the measure of all things. A team of decorators is already scaling your body, hanging banners from your ears, and wrapping garlands around your ankles. Gulliver's Height Day, declares the mayor, standing on your shoulder with a megaphone, your thimble hollowed out. We celebrate the day you fell from the sky by measuring everything against you. The cake is 10 knuckles tall, 1 knuckle for each week you've been here. The banners are as wide as your outstretched arms, and the fireworks, he pauses dramatically, will explode at the height of your head. If you look around, the village green has been transformed into a giant, to them, ruler, with markers every 5 knuckles. Here stands Gulliver's knee, here his waist, here the very top of his majestic head. Children are playing a game where they try to jump as high as your shoelace, while adults argue over whether the food tables should be set at Gulliver's elbow height or Gulliver's wrist height. Apparently, elbow is more fashionable. In Gulliver's Travels, Swift briefly mentions Lilliputian festivals, but he never says they are literally measured by Gulliver. Now every arch, every float, every piece of confetti is scaled to your body. The parade route is marked in Gulliver steps, and the judge's stand is built to your knee height, so they can look you in the eye, well, your kneecap, but close enough. The highlight is the Gulliver cake, a towering masterpiece, 10 knuckles, or 15 inches, decorated with tiny portraits of your face and edible replicas of your footprints. The candles, 60 tiny flames, 1 for each knuckle of your height. Make a wish, shouts the crowd as you bend down carefully so as not to blow them away and puff out the candles. Your exhale creates a breeze that lifts their hats, which they decide is part of the magic. But next comes the Gulliver Olympics, where villagers compete in events based on your body. The winner of each event gets It's a medal made from your fingernail, engraved with "I measured up." You're roped into a game called Gulliver Says, where the mayor calls out commands based on your body. Touch your nose, stand as tall as a Gulliver, hop on one foot for 5 knuckles. It's ridiculous, but the villagers cheer as you awkwardly hop on one foot, your shadow bouncing across the square. The strangest tradition is the Gulliver tapestry, a giant to them, cloth woven from your hair, depicting your arrival in Lilliput. Every thread is measured to your hair's thickness, and the weavers argue over whether your eyes in the tapestry should be Gulliver eye width or Gulliver eye length. They compromise on both, creating slightly oval eyes that make you look like a friendly alien. As the sun sets, the fireworks explode above your head, painting the sky with colors that match your shirt. The villagers ooh and ah, pointing at the sparks that land in your hair, which they quickly brush out, lest you catch fire. The mayor gives a speech about unity in measurement, and how your presence has given them a scale to dream by. You stand there, covered in confetti made from your toenail clippings, glittered, feeling both ridiculous and loved. In Lilliput, a celebration isn't just a party. It's a mathematical ode to your existence. Every streamer, every cheer, every tiny medal is a reminder that in a world of little people, you're the giant who gave them a way to measure their big dreams. And as the last firework fades, you realize something. You've become more than a visitor. You're their yardstick, their calendar, their living, breathing symbol of possibility, which is nice. Except when they ask you to stand still for 3 hours so they can measure the circumference of your head for next year's party hats. The morning after the celebration, you're greeted by a fleet of tiny ships in the nearby stream, each one a walnut shell with a sail made from a butterfly wing. Blefuscu ambassadors, shouts the mayor, scurrying up your leg with a tiny flag, half red, half white, to represent diplomatic neutrality. They've come to discuss trade, but be warned, their measurements are barbaric. Ah, right, Lilliput's neighbor, Blefuscu, is a nation of tiny people too, but they measure things with birds instead of giants. Their standard unit is the Blefuscu feather, the length of a sparrow's tail feather, and their weight is Blefuscu eggs. How many robin eggs fit in a basket? This is going to be a disaster. The ambassadors disembark, dressed in robes embroidered with tiny birds, and carrying scrolls tied with twine. The head ambassador, a stern-looking Lilliputian with a feather in his cap, marches up to your foot and clears his throat. We come bearing gifts, a chest of Blefuscu gold, 100 feathers worth, and a treaty signed in the blood of 50 Blefuscu birds. May it last 1,000 feathers of time. You look at the chest of gold. It's a thimble filled with beads the size of sand. The treaty is a postage stamp with tiny red dots. The Lilliputians, meanwhile, present their own gifts. A necklace made from your hair, 100 knuckles long, and a map of their kingdom, drawn on your fingernails. The Blefuscans gasp. A necklace as long as a snake, a map the size of a breadcrumb. These Lilliputians are wild. Here's the obscure little knowledge. In Gulliver's travels, the war between Lilliput and Blefuscu starts over how to break an egg. But Swift never mentions their measurement wars. Turns out, they've been arguing for decades about whether feathers or knuckles are superior. Now you're the unwilling referee in a dispute that's part math, part pride. The trade negotiation quickly devolves into chaos. The Blefuscans want to trade 100 feathers of silk for 50 knuckles of grain. But no one knows the conversion rate. 1 feather equals 2 knuckles, shouts a Lilliputian merchant. Lies, replies a Blefuscan. A feather is 3 knuckles. Your giants are just fat. You try to help, holding up your pinky 1 knuckle next to a sparrow feather, which is actually 1.5 knuckles. See, you say, feather is longer. The Lilliputians gasp, heresy. The Gulliver knuckle is absolute. The Blefuscans cheer, finally, proof that feathers are superior. But the real crisis comes when discussing border walls. The Lilliputians want the wall to be 30 knuckles tall, your knee height, while the Blefuscans insist on 50 feathers, which, after much arguing, you determine is 75 knuckles, way taller than your head. They're trying to block our giant's view, shouts the Lilliputian king, stamping his tiny foot. You end up as a human ruler. Literally, the ambassadors stand on either side of you, measuring your body with feathers and knuckles. His elbow is 15 knuckles, which is 22.5 feathers, so the wall should be half that, 11.25 feathers, or 7.5 knuckles. The math makes your head spin, but they eventually agree on a Gulliver Blefuscu hybrid unit. 1 hybrid unit equals 1 knuckle plus 1 feather, divided by 2. It makes no sense, but they're thrilled. The funniest moment is when the Blefuscans present a giant feast, portions measured in feathers, which means each dish is the size of a pea to you. The Lilliputians, embarrassed, serve you a Gulliver feast, a shoe bowl of stew, which to the Blefuscans looks like a swimming pool. The giant eats like a god, whispers a Blefuscan ambassador, taking notes on your incredible appetite. By evening, the treaty is signed on a piece of your toenail, cross-stitched with both feathers and knuckles, and the Blefuscans depart, promising to return with a hybrid unit measuring tools. The Lilliputians, meanwhile, are already rewriting their school books. 1 knuckle equals 0.666 feathers, approx, but Gulliver knuckles are still better. You lean back, exhausted from being a human calculator. In Lilliput, diplomacy isn't just about words. It's about units. Every treaty, every gift, every border dispute is a battle of measurements. And you're the unwilling arbitrator. But hey, at least you prevented a war over whether a feather is longer than a knuckle. Now, if only they could agree on how to measure a good time. The Lilliputians say 100 blinks. The Blefuscans say 50 feathers. You suggest 1 Gulliver nap, which everyone seems to agree on. The morning you leave Lilliput starts with a tiny tug on your beard. It's the head tailor, holding a bundle wrapped in your own hair. Farewell gift, he says, voice cracking. A miniature set of Gulliver knuckles, carved from your fingernail, painted with your eye color. Use them to remember that measurements are more than numbers. You blink, careful not to let a tear fall. Last time you cried, it flooded the village square. The Lilliputians have spent weeks preparing for your departure, building a raft from your toenail clippings, waterproofed with beeswax, and packing provisions in thimbles, Gulliver carrots, hair thread, even a tiny vial of your own tears, labeled emergency giant water. As you wade into the stream, the raft bobbing at your feet, you think back to your first day here when a knuckle became a ruler, a footprint a field, a blink a second. In Lilliput, measurement wasn't just practical, it was personal. They didn't just measure you, they included you, turning your giantness into a language of belonging. In Gulliver's travels, Swift rushes through Gulliver's departure, but he never mentions the goodbye gifts. These tiny people who turned your body into their world send you off with tokens of your time together. A map of the kingdom etched on your fingernail, a calendar marked in blinks and thumps, even a tiny crown made from your eyelashes, too small for your head, but perfect for a doll. The raft is pushed off by a fleet of walnut shell boats, their crews shouting, "Long live the Gulliver Knuckle," and send us a postcard, preferably the size of your thumbnail. You wave, careful not to create a breeze that capsizes them, and watch as their tiny figures grow smaller on the shore. Back in your world, everything feels too big. A ruler with inches seems abstract, a clock with seconds impersonal. You find yourself measuring doorways in knuckles. 30, same as Lilliput's giant doors, and timing chores by blinks. 100 blinks to make coffee, 500 to clean the kitchen. One night, you open the bundle from the tailor. Inside is a miniature ruler, each knuckle marked with tiny notches, and a note. In Lilliput, we didn't measure to control, we measured to connect. You run a finger over the smooth nail, remembering how a village turned your flaws into foundations, your awkwardness into art. The world may have standardized measurements, but Lilliput taught you something better, that the most meaningful units aren't on a tape measure. They are in the way a community turns a giant's pinky into a story, a tear into a memory, a footprint into a home. As you drift off to sleep, you swear you can hear tiny hammers tapping, tiny voices counting knuckles, and somewhere, far away, the gentle hum of a world that measures life by the people in it now. Let your eyes close slowly, like those tiny Lilliputian eyelids measuring out the end of a day. Imagine the soft hum of their tiny world fading into the background, replaced by the quiet rhythm of your own breath. The story of Gulliver's knuckles and blinks is a lullaby now, a reminder that even in the most ordinary things, like a finger, a step, a heartbeat, there's magic in how we measure our days. Feel your body sinking into the bed, each breath taking you deeper into a dream where measurements are kind, where giants are friends, and where every tiny moment is as precious as a Gulliver hair coin. Let the warmth of this story wrap around you, like a bedsheet stitched with eyelashes, gentle and strange and perfectly yours. So rest now, knowing that in some tiny corner of imagination, Lilliputians are still counting knuckles and smiling at the thought of the giant who taught them that size is just a story we tell ourselves. Good night, and may your dreams be measured in all the wonderful, odd, perfect units that make you feel at home.